Structured event logging is so much more than just writing a message to a file. Since .NET Core natively supports structured event logging, I wanted to introduce a logger that takes advantage of these additional features. Serilog is an easy to configure and easy to use logging system that you can plug into a .NET Core project within minutes. Today, we're going to configure Serilog, see how to use it in a basic logging scenario, then take advantage of the structured logging by hooking up a visual event sync called Seq or SEQ. The source code for today's video is available to download using the link below in the description. You'll also find links there to sign up for my mailing list and for my Patreon. Just last week, mailing list members and Patreon members received special discounts on my courses that were not offered anywhere else. Now, if you haven't come across me before, my name is Tim Corey, and it's my goal to make learning C# easier. One of the ways I do that is by teaching context. There are a lot of tutorials out there that teach you what to do. I go a few steps beyond that to show you when to do it, why you should or should not do it, what pitfalls to avoid, and what the best practices are. Basically, I get you ready for the real world. If that's the type of training you're interested in, subscribe to my channel and hit the little bell icon to be notified when I release new videos. Okay, let's go over to Visual Studio. And what we're going to do today is we're going to create a new project that is a ASP.NET Core Web application. This is the easiest way of getting started. We can also do a worker service because that also has the built-in logging. It'd be a little bit harder, but we could do it with a console app or even a desktop app. Those just don't, by default, start up the logger in the same way. And so you have to do a little bit more tweaking. I just want to get right to logging, so we're going to do an ASP.NET Core Web application. Hit Next. We're going to call this the Serilog Demo and the Serilog Demo app. You click Create. And the purpose here is, of course, not to create a really full-featured web application. It's more just to create an application that allows us to do some logging. Now I'm going to choose a web application that is configured for HTTPS, but no Docker and no authentication. Now right now it's .NET Core 3.1. That's because I've got a preview version of Visual Studio, and it won't let me choose .NET Core 3.0 in this dropdown anymore, which is a little frustrating. But it's okay, because 3.0 will work just the same as this 3.1 does. In fact, I can even roll back to 3.0 in my project, and I probably will, just so you can see it and work with it in the production version, not the pre-production version. So we'll hit create. And once that gets created, notice it's downloading the project information, or it will be. Let's go over to our manage here. We'll edit our project and change this to 3.0 and then do a rebuild to make sure that will build. We have a failure. All right, and it says that the OBJ folder, there's a project.assets.json that doesn't have the right version. No problem. We're going to open folder in File Explorer. Oh, there it is. Open another part of the screen. We're going to delete. If you've ever done any work with .NET Core, you've probably seen the iLog. Maybe you even know that .NET Core has logging built in by default. But how do you use it? How do you configure it? Can you replace it? And is that a big deal? These are some of the questions that this video will tackle. We're going to look at what is provided out of the box for .NET Core projects and how to use it effectively. Now, the source code for today's video is available to download using the link below in the description. You'll also find links there to sign up for my mailing list and for my Patreon. As you watch this video, please post your thoughts and questions in the comments below. I'll do my best to respond to you. Now, if you haven't come across me before, my name is Tim Corey, and it's my goal to make learning C# easier. One of the ways I do that is by teaching context. There are a lot of tutorials out there that will teach you what to do. I go a few steps beyond that to show you when to do it, why you should do it or should not do it, what the pitfalls are to avoid, and what the best practices are. Basically, I get you ready for the real world. If that's the type of training you're interested in, subscribe to my channel and hit the little bell icon to be notified when I release new videos. Okay, let's get started. We're going to create a new project. Now I'm using Visual Studio 2019, the preview version, which has the latest bits in it. In this case, I'm going to select an ASP.NET Core web application. I'm going to call this Logging Demo and Logging Demo App for the solution name. I hit create, and I get my choice of what type of project to create. Now, this is one case where you may deviate a little bit from me when you create your demo application. So if you're following along, if you don't have the preview version of Visual Studio, you probably don't have ASP.NET Core 3.0. I'm going to select 3.0 because there are a couple of tweaks in how logging works, actually how dependency injection works in .NET Core 3.0 that will change how we do a couple of things. And so I'll try to point those out, but most of this project will work exactly the same if you're in .NET Core 2.2. So if you want to choose 2.2, that's fine, or even 2.1, but I'm choosing the .NET Core 3.0, which isn't quite ready for production. It's almost. It's going to be released, I believe, in September, and this is pretty much the stable version right now for .NET Core 3. So we're going to select Web Application. Over here on the right, I'm not going to choose Authentication. I am going to configure HTTPS just because that should be a default, and I will not use Docker support. Notice down here, my .NET Core version is the .NET 3 Preview 8 version. We'll hit Create, and once that creates, we'll get a basic web application for Razor Pages. And if we open up our Solution Explorer here, we can see that we have a few pages in shared, we have a couple in shared, we have a few down here including index.cshtml. If you open up index.cshtml, we'll notice this iLogger here. And that's what we're going to cover today. What is that iLogger? Where does it come from? How does it get configured? And how do we use it? So the first place to look in .NET Core, whenever you have a configuration thing like this, there's two places. One, look in Startup to see if there's anything configured in Startup. And in this case, I'll give you a hint, there's not. There's nothing in Startup for logging here. And then we can go to program.cs, which is the entry point for our application, to see if there's anything configured here for logging. Now, if you notice the green squigglies, just so you know, the reason why is because they want me to switch over to the block body method instead of this lambda expression, which I'm actually going to do. So I'm going to say use block body method instead of the lambda, and I'll configure that to look a little nicer. So right here is where logging gets configured. And if you can't see it, I understand that. It's right here under Create Default Builder that logging gets configured. And how do I know that? Well, if I hit F12 to go to the definition here for Create Default Builder, and expand out this comment here, it tells me all the things that Default Builder does, which is very helpful because we don't see it normally. It's like, let me do some looking at Microsoft source code, but in general, this just gives us a good overview of what's happening inside this Default Builder. And if we look right down here, configure the Microsoft.extensions.logging.iloggerFactory to log to the console, debug, and event source outputs. So that's the default configuration for logging. Now, what does that mean? We'll get into that in a minute. But just know that that's where logging by default happens. Now, also in here is enable scope validation on a dependency injection container when the host is in development. And there's some other things in here that may be of interest to you. So there's other things that this does, but one of the things it does is it configures default logging. And it logs to debug, console, and the event source. So let's do this. Let's just show off what happens out of the box with nothing being touched. No configuration changes. I'm going to launch this as logging demo, not IIS Express, because I want to see the console. The console pops up when I run it from itself, a self-hosted console. So there's the console. And notice here, if we scroll to the top, we have info and then what's going on. We have info and what's going on. All the way down here, we have lots of information events. This is logging, and it's baked into Microsoft's code. So Microsoft has put logging in their own code and said, iLogger can pick this up as well. And so we capture things like, let's look at the very top here, now listening on, and there's the web URL for HTTPS and the one for HTTP. So we can capture this information right out of Microsoft's code. That logger is picking that up as an information event. So again, right out of the box, that happened. So this is console logging, where we log to a console. Makes sense, right? And then over here in Visual Studio, we have debug logging. And if we move this over, this is the same information, basically. So if we come down here, and debug gets a lot more full with other stuff. But notice the Microsoft hosting lifetime information, now listening on, and there's the HTTPS port and the HTTP port. So that has captured the logging information as well. So that's out of the box. We didn't configure anything. It just kind of happened by magic. And if you know me, I'm not a big fan of magic, because magic, when it breaks, is a major problem. Because now you have to learn how the magic works before you can even learn why the magic is broken, before you can fix the problem. And that to me is an issue. So I want to know more about how this system works, how it's configured, and how I can use it. Let's start off with the basics. And the basics are that we want to change where we're logging to, or at least control it ourselves instead of letting Microsoft control it behind the scenes. So to do that, we have this. This is how we set up and run our application. We first create the host builder with arguments that are passed in from the command line, if there are any. We then do the build action, and then we do the run action. And the build action comes down here. This is the this is the host builder. So this right here. It comes down and it runs these configurations, and then it builds it, and then it runs it. So what we're going to do is modify this create host builder, the configuration section, and we are going to add in our own configurations. So we have host.create default builder. That's where the iLogger gets configured by default. And then we have configure web host defaults. Well, we're going to add another section in here. And notice it's a little bit hard to see because of the Lambda expression and all the rest. But we have this statement, and then we have dot configure web hosting or web host defaults. Well, this can be chained because this returns an iHost builder. So I can chain an additional action in here. For example, configure logging. And I can chain this at before or after the configure web host defaults. I'm going to do before. So configure logging. And then in here, I'm going to create a Lambda expression that passes in two parameters. First, the context, and second, the logging information. And I say Lambda expression, and then open and close curly braces. And I'm all set. So it looks just like this pattern here. It's just that it says configure logging instead of configure web host defaults. With that, I can now change my configuration for my logging. Let's do that. Let's start off by clearing out what Microsoft has done for us. So logging.clear providers. can clear out everybody that's listening for logging events. Next, let's add some configuration. Now, configuration is how we configure our loggers. What's listening, who's listening, what's listening to, those types of things. So add configuration. We're going to say context. That comes from this variable right here, context. Context.configuration. This is going to pull from our app settings.json or our key vault or whatever we have configured already to have settings. .NET 6 eliminated the startup.cs file from all web projects. It reworked how projects are built, and it eliminated the bin and obj folders. Those are folders you do not need. They get recreated for you when you rebuild. Now when I do a rebuild, it should be the restore the correct versions, and it builds succeed, which it does. So we're all set. Now we have a 3.0 project. So even if you did have 3.1, that would work, but you could also run it on a production machine that has 3.0. So no worries there if you don't have the preview version like I do. So this is a basic ASP.NET Razor Pages web application. And in it, we have our index.cshtml.cs project, which is pulling out a logger, and we can do some quick logging on this. So we could say logger.log information and say you requested the index page. Okay, real quick, it's already baked in using the iLogger inside of ASP.NET Core. Now, iLogger is an interface, which means we can plug any type of concrete value against that as long as it implements the iLogger interface. So right now it's using the built-in logger, but we can change that to use Serolog in just a minute. But first, let's change this to say Serolog demo, which what this does is it starts what's called Kestrel. And Kestrel is a web server that allows us to see the command line of what's actually going on with our web application. So I'm going to start that. I'm going to pull it over here. This is our Kestrel. And if we scroll up here, it's going to be kind of hidden because it's still an info event. But in here should be our request where it says, hey, you requested the index page. And it's in here. Let me see if I can find it. Right there. So info, and it says you requested the index page. There's our logging event. Now, all these other log events are happening as well. Well, these events are ones that Microsoft has put logging in their stuff so you can see what's happening around your application. So, for example, the page action invoker with a value of 4 inside, I'm not sure what the 4 stands for, execute the page index in 101.2404 milliseconds. So a tenth of a second, it loaded the index page. All right, and there's a whole bunch more information here as far as getting information for JavaScript and a bunch more. So this is all the stuff that's going on. This is a very, very helpful window to be viewing. Instead of the IIS, this Kestrel window allows you to see what's happening on your web server. So for example, I'm gonna click Office, actually I'll bring it on the screen, but watch this window. When I bring this window over here, I click on privacy. Okay, hey, nothing's happened, awesome. I think the reason why is if I have, there we go, I had to hit enter. So I paused the screen because I had been clicking on it, but now if we go back to privacy again, notice it now goes to the privacy page and it shows more information about how long it took, the return message, which was 200, meaning success, and so on. So you can see every time you get an action, it shows you what values go on behind the scenes. That can be very helpful. That's part of the logging system. Now let's add a little bit more logging, because this is not necessarily here's what logging is in .NET Core 3. I have a video on that, and I'll link that in the description probably, but this is not a video on just logging. It's about using Serilog with our logging. So let's set up a few things in here just to make a little more logging information for us. So I'm going to do a try here. I'm going to catch an exception. And in this catch, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a logger.log error, where you pass in the exception, and then you pass in a message saying, hey, we caught GHT, there we go, caught this exception in the index get call. Okay, and that's just going to catch an exception. We had to throw an exception first, so let's do this. Let's do let's just do a throw. Throw new exception. This is our demo exception. So you're going to come into the onGet, it's going to log something, and then immediately it's going to do a try catch, and in the try it's going to throw an exception, which immediately goes to the catch, catches the exception, and then logs that exception. Is this a standard thing to do? Of course not. You don't just throw exceptions just to catch them. But what this will do is it'll give us an actual exception to put into our logger. In fact, let's make it a little bit better I'm going to cut this out temporarily, and I'm going to do a for loop where I is less than 100. So start from 0 and loop up, and we're going to say if I equals 56. So 56, when I is 56, then throws exception. Otherwise, what we're going to do is we're going to log. So we're going to say logger.log info, and we'll say the information is, let's do this. The value of I is, and we're going to put our value here. Okay, like so. In fact, I'm going to call this the I variable. All right. Now, one of the things that I have heard before is, oh, Tim, you made a mistake. You need to put the $sign first. And that's incorrect. You do not put the $sign here. These curly braces are different than string interpolation. Okay, string interpolation, you put the $sign first, and then you put a variable in here. Instead, this looks a little bit more like the string.format, or what you do in a console write line, where you have the curly braces here, and then it refers to a variable after the fact. Okay, this is where we get into structured event logging. So what happens here in a simple logger is it's going to take this value of I and place it into the first variable in line, this variable. Now, I could have called this I, and I initially did. I call it I variable for a very important reason. I want you to realize that this name does not correspond to this name. It does not matter what these two are named. It's based upon position. And the reason that is valuable is because you can have something called I, but really what this is a loop count value. And you call it loop count value. In this case, I'm going to call it I variable. I could call it loop count variable or value. Okay? And it's still going to work just as fine. All right? But what this does when structured event logging is used is it will save this string, the output of the string, which is going to put 1, 2, 3, 4 in this spot. But it will also save separately this as the variable name and then the value as the actual variable value. It's going to save that separately. So we can pull it out. We can do searches based upon that. We can do filtering based upon that and all the rest. So very important, these structured event logs. But right now we're not using structured event logs. We're using the basic event logs that come with our application, with inside of ASP.NET Core. So let's run this again, and we're going to see what happens in our structured event. Okay, so it just happened. We scroll up. We got our 1 through 55. So the value of I is 53, 54, 55, 56. It throws an exception. We caught this exception in the index call. We got a fail message. Okay, now we didn't continue on after that because I put the catch outside of the for each. We can change that if you want. I'm not going to. We're going to leave it just like that. So it's going to log 0 through 55, and then it's going to fail on number 56 and catch that exception. Okay, so that's our setup for applications. All it's going to do. Now let's look at logging. Let's start by going to the program.cs file. In this program.cs file, let's first of all fix this. I like using the block body for this. It does make a formatting mess, but using the block body allows you a little bit nicer and cleaner, I think, but it's up to you if you want that format. Either way, it's just putting the curly braces around, that's all it's doing, versus the arrow function. Okay, so we have this static void main. This is the entry point for our web application. But what I want to do is add logging right from the start. So I am going to set up Serilog right here. The first thing I'm going to do is I've got to talk to the configuration file, the app.config file, or the appsettings.json file, which right now has some settings for the built-in logger, which I'm going to get rid of in just a minute. But first, I want to pull settings from this for Serilog, because you may have seen Serilog being configured right in code, and that's fine for quick and dirty, get it working. What you really want to do is you want to configure an appsettings.json, because then you can change it at runtime. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to say var configuration equals new configuration builder, not binder, builder. I'm going to say add JSON file, And the JSON file is app-settings.json. And then I'm going to say build. And what this will do is it's going to build a configuration system. So it's iConfiguration root. This is because we don't yet have dependency injection at this point in our application. That comes later. And so we can't just ask for an iConfiguration value. We have to essentially do what the system's doing behind the scenes later. We have to do it now, and that's ask for configuration. Now, I am just asking for app-settings.json. I am not doing key vault. I am not doing environmental variables. I'm not doing the app-settings.development.json file. I'm not doing any of those things, just the one file. And that's okay. And the reason why is because this app-settings.json file is where I will store everything all the time, even for production. Normally, you have all those different options because at production or in staging or in your test environment, you're going to want those in different places. So for example, a connection string, you're going to want to have in app-settings.json for local testing. But then for production, you won't want to have it in app-settings.json. You'll probably want it in either the environmental variables in, let's say, Azure, or you'll want it in your Azure Key Vault in order to keep it secure and not accessible. And so you want to override the settings. For logging, we're not going to go that route. We're just going to store everything here. If you wanted to change it at some point later, you could do that. But I think this is plenty for what we need. It's not the same as secured passwords. Okay, this is just settings for your logging. So it sets up and says, okay, you can now talk to the configuration builder. That's step one. Now, what we're going to do next is we're going to say log.logger equals new logger configuration. Now, right now it's yelling at me and saying, I don't know where this stuff is. And if we do a drop down here, I'm not even sure the control dot will find anything. Oh, it does. Install package Serilog. Okay, so it can install a package Serilog for us. We're going to do that manually. So let's go to our dependencies, right-click and say Manage NuGet Packages. We're going to go to Browse. And we're going to search for Serilog.ASP.NET Core. So it's the Serilog for ASP.NET Core logging. Now, if you were doing a hosted service like a worker service, you might choose the hosted services extension instead. But this worked just fine. You can also just install just Serilog, which is a base, but this has got a few more features for us. And it does have a dependency on Serilog, so it's going to install that anyway. All right, so we'll install that and accept. And now we can come back to our program.cs and we do a control dot, have the add using Serilog at the top. All right, now that we've done that, we can say dot read from, and we need another extension for this. So there is now a way to read from our configuration file until we go back to our dependencies. You might want to keep this open because we're going to go a couple times more. But I do want to show what each part did. All right, so Serilog.settings.configuration. So it's going to read from our app-settings.json file. So Serilog.settings.configuration. I'll leave it open. And now we can say read from dot configuration. Oops, you know what? That should be logger configuration. There we go. Now you have to pass in a configuration here, which I just passed in this variable right here. So dot build.